Hi guys, it's Rachel, and I tried out 3 different Snickerdoodle cookie recipes to figure out which one is best. First, I tried a recipe by Food Network by Trisha Yearwood, then I tried a recipe by Tasty, and then finally I concluded with a recipe by Bon Appetit. So today I will be going over and reviewing each recipe, comparing them and stacking them against each other to see which one is the real winner. So these recipes start out fairly similar, but there are a few key differences in between them. For the Food Network recipe by Trisha Yearwood, she starts out by combining the butter, shortening, which is a different ingredient compared to the rest of the recipes, and her eggs, brown sugar, and white sugar, and she just beats all of that together at once. For the Tasty recipe, it starts out a little bit differently as well. We don't need to use an electric mixer for one, and first we just beat together the softened butter and vanilla. Then we go ahead and add in our brown sugar and white sugar and beat that until combined. And for the Bon Appetit recipe, we're going to blend together our melted butter, our brown sugar, and our white sugar all together in an electric mixer until light and fluffy. In the Bon Appetit recipe, after your butter and sugar have been whipped together, you're going to go ahead and add in a little bit of vanilla bean paste. The addition of vanilla bean paste is a little bit different in the Bon Appetit recipe. In the Tasty recipe, you saw that we added vanilla extract, but in the Food Network recipe, we don't add any vanilla at all. For the Tasty and Bon Appetit recipes, you'll need to add in an egg at this point and then whip until light and fluffy. For the Food Network recipe, you already should have added the egg, so there's not much to do right now. Once the egg is incorporated, we'll move on to our dry ingredients. As for the dry ingredients, the Food Network and the Tasty recipes are pretty similar. You just go ahead and add in your dry ingredients, so that includes the flour, the baking soda, the salt, and the cream of tartar. And you'll just go ahead and add it directly into the bowl. Bon Appetit is a little bit different because they want you to combine your dry ingredients separately and whisk them together, and then go ahead and add it into the wet ingredients. At this point, the dough should start coming together, and you should mix until just combined for all of them. Once your dry ingredients are incorporated, the Food Network recipe is ready to go. You just have to scoop your dough balls out, roll them into a ball, and then we're going to put them in a little bit of a sugar coating. Then you'll coat the dough balls in that sugar and then place it on a baking sheet. Once your dry ingredients are incorporated into your Tasty recipe, you're going to actually cover the dough with some plastic wrap and put it in the fridge while you preheat the oven. As for the Bon Appetit recipe, you're going to do something very similar. You're going to let the dough hydrate for 30 minutes, so just let it sit and don't touch it. Once your oven is preheated to 375 degrees for the Tasty recipe, you can go ahead and scoop out your cookie dough and roll them into balls and then dust them in a ratio of about half a tablespoon of white sugar to about half a tablespoon of ground cinnamon. Roll the cookie dough balls in the sugar, get a nice generous coating, and then also place them on some parchment paper. And for the Bon Appetit recipe, after 30 minutes of letting the dough hydrate, you'll go ahead and make a ratio of about 1 tablespoon of white sugar to half a tablespoon of ground cinnamon. Blend that together, and then scoop out your cookie dough balls and roll them in. One thing I will say about the Bon Appetit recipe at this point is that it gets really sticky. The dough is very, very sticky. You can just look at my hands and look at the state of my hands. This is a very messy affair. Compared to the other 2 recipes, this cookie dough is just so much stickier and harder to work with. That being said, it does actually absorb more of the cinnamon sugar coating, I think, because the dough is so much stickier. Now comes the time for baking. For the Food Network recipe, we're going to bake the cookies off at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for approximately 8 to 10 minutes. For the Tasty recipe, we're going to bake the cookies at 375 degrees Fahrenheit, a little bit of a lower temp, for about 10 to 12 minutes. And lastly, for the Bon Appetit recipe, we're going to bake the cookies off at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for approximately 8 to 10 minutes. And the very last thing is to let all the cookies cool down on a cooling rack before you dig in. I have all 3 cookies with me here right now. This is the Food Network recipe, this is the Tasty recipe, and this is the Bon Appetit recipe. In terms of appearance and presentation, I would say that the Food Network recipe definitely has the most height and it looks the most cakey. The Tasty recipe actually has more of a nice crackle to it and is a good size. It didn't spread out that much. And then the last recipe, the Bon Appetit recipe, definitely is the thinnest cookie but has the darkest coloring of cinnamon sugar on the outside. In terms of the cracks on top of the cookies, I would say that the Food Network recipe did not have very many cracks at all, and then the Bon Appetit and the Tasty recipes definitely had nice crackage, I guess you could say, on top of the cookies. I'm gonna start with the Food Network recipe by Trisha Yearwood. Take a bite. It's a very cakey recipe. The cookie is not very dense. It's very light and fluffy. I'm not really a big fan because I like denser and chewier cookies. And this recipe doesn't use any brown sugar, it's entirely white sugar, which I think may have an impact on this cookie. The other different thing about this cookie is that it uses a combination of butter and shortening. So I think the shortening may have lightened up the cookie texture a little bit. And I like to have a hefty, chewy, thick boy, you know? Overall, not super impressed with Trisha Yearwood's Snickerdoodle recipe, but let's move on to the Tasty recipe and give it a try. This one is immediately almost like 10 times better than the other one I just had. The cookie is chewier, more dense, I think because of the brown sugar, and even has a little bit more of a saltier taste. I also think I get more of that cream of tartar, that little tang, you know, that you get from Snickerdoodles, which makes it really unique. I think there might be even more cream of tartar in here so I can really taste it. And I really like this one so far. All right, so our last contender here is the Bon Appetit recipe. Let's give it a go. Guys, this is really hard. This Bon Appetit recipe is actually so dang good. In terms of flavor, the Bon Appetit recipe is spot on. It's delicious. And it also looks a little bit more visually appealing because the cinnamon sugar is a bit darker on the outside. I will say though that the cookie is a little bit thin, so it's not my favorite. It's spread out a little bit too much in the oven, but I do really like the flavor and the texture and the coloring. So now it boils down to either Tasty or Bon Appetit. I think these are the two top contenders. Food Network, sorry Trisha Yearwood, but you're out of the picture. So if I have to pick a winner between Tasty and Bon Appetit, that winner would be, drumroll please, the Bon Appetit recipe. This was a really close call. I think between Tasty and Bon Appetit, these two Snickerdoodles were really tasty. I love the texture and consistency of both of them, and I will say that visually, the shape of the Tasty recipe looks so much better, but the coloring of the Bon Appetit recipe just really did me in. I will also say that I enjoyed the flavor of both of them immensely. I don't think you can go wrong with either, but just something about the Bon Appetit recipe edges it out for me just a little bit. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed watching me try 3 different recipes for Snickerdoodles. I hope you guys found some useful insight into them and now have a better idea of what Snickerdoodle recipe might be right for you. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!